Hey, action figure fans, welcome back to the Spectre Creative Channel. I'm Scott ToyGuru Neitlich. I've been a brand manager and a toy manager for about 20 years in the toy industry. And today, I'm answering a question I've gotten on the forums or in the comments about who chooses action figures. Meaning, when you are making an action figure line, who does the actual choice of what figures go in that line? Now, we're all kind of familiar with the concept of, I guess, fan lists and fan requests, fan top tens, which come in both official ways and in sort of wish lists that different groups create, whether it's wish lists that are polled from members of a website or just put together, on YouTube. Some people, people make videos about action figures that they would want to see made and try to use that as a way of getting the attention of toy companies. Or even when, toy companies do official fan choice lists or, fan choice votes with the winning toy becoming an actual character, such as the case with Star Wars. They've done this a few times where the fan choice figure is even called out on package and said, this awesome action figure that we're making is because it won a fan's choice poll, and that's why it exists, even though it's a giant weird elephant. No, just kidding. I love Effin. He was an awesome Jabba's Palace character. The perfect example of a company-sponsored choice. So who makes these choices? Who are the ones behind the scenes that are choosing which action figures are made? Is it an evil cabal of people sitting in a darkened room plotting action figure world domination? I know that tends to be what a lot of us think it is, but no, it's not an evil cabal. First off, the rule of who chooses an action figure is that there really are no set rules. There's not one way it's done. So it's very different when you have something like a movie-based line based on IP owned by a studio versus something that's owned by a toy company. So first off, looking at a studio-owned line, so something like Star Wars, a lot of times, and again, there's no one rule, but many times when you have a high-profile line, it's the studio that kind of dictates who's going to be in the line. They'll say, we want these figures. They may even say, we want this form factor, like we want our IP, our characters produced in this way, in this scale, in this style. That happens all the time, and it's not just Star Wars. I was just using an example. So as an example for a line that I worked on, the DC Universe Classics, when we did the first year of the Classics, the studio, meaning Warner Brothers and DC, basically told us exactly who to release in every wave. As an example, they wanted a Batman or Superman in every wave for the first year to make sure that one of their big two heavy hitters were available in some, form, some, version of them in each wave. And this was for the first year, so this was like the first 6 waves of figures. You can see the director's commentary on these waves on this channel. I break down each wave in each video. And as Mattel, as we built trust with Warner Brothers and DC over time, our partners at Warner Brothers and DC, who were the IP intellectual property owners of DC characters, understood that we understood the brand, and they allowed us more and more freedom as we went, even to the point that some of that Commandy figure there was a character that they let me, the brand manager, choose. They said I could choose any character I wanted, and we'll get into that when I do a video on this wave. But the point is, over time, we got more and more freedom. Other IP, like for example, another line I worked on at Mattel was the Ghostbuster Classics line. And that was also one where, even right out the gate, the studio that we were, the consumer product group, were very free with who we chose, letting us do characters like Walter Peck early in the line. Another reason, though, Walter Peck actually got chosen is because we had a little while till we were able to get Bill Murray to sign off on his face sculpt. So that's another reason why figures get chosen, is based on who you can get. So what about a toy line that is owned by a toy company? So that is going to be controlled by someone called a brand manager. So exactly what is a brand manager? You always hear about this. So the brand manager is basically sort of the hub, the person that is like the center wheel between design and production. And it's usually someone like this. I actually Googled what does a brand manager look like, and this was the image that popped up. I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, it usually is kind of a young, uh, well-dressed person. In Mattel's case, it was usually someone coming out of USC's Marshall School of Business or UCLA's Anderson School of Management. And a lot of times, Mattel was their first job. A lot of them started as interns, and then upon graduation, they get a job as a brand manager at Mattel overseeing a toy line. And it could be any toy line from, Barbie to He-Man to, uh, games and puzzles, all sorts of things. And their job is to basically understand the 4 P's of marketing, if you will: product, price, promotion, and placement, and how you can tie all those together in the end to, well, maximize sales. I mean, their job, big shocker, is to make the most amount of money for the company because the company reports to stockholders. And this isn't, just for Mattel. This is for all big companies, all Fortune 500 companies. I was just using Mattel as an example. So not all brand managers are kind of on the same footing, if you will, have the same amount of spotlight on them. It really, it can differ based on what brand you're working on, how much oversight you have. And that's really where middle management comes in. So middle management is the team that's overseeing sort of your team, your army of brand managers. Your brand managers are overseeing each individual brand, and they all report to a middle management person. So the brand manager is going to put together something like this, which is called a B sheet. I mean, they'll work with design and they'll work with packaging and other members of the team, but really at the end of the day, it's the brand manager's job to come up with the character selection and to choose who goes in the line. Now, a line that is a movie line, like something really big, like say, Avengers, Infinity War, Endgame, things like that, are going to have way more eyes on it, basically having to get approval of the B sheet from more members of middle management. It may even go up to top management, if you will. I mean, of course, it's going to get approval from the IP holder, and the IP holder may even be dictating a lot of this, as I mentioned, a few minutes ago in the video. But when you have, a major movie line versus something like Masters of the Universe Classics, which is a much smaller run and much smaller sales base, the brand manager is going to have actually more freedom because there's going to be less people reviewing it because it's a much smaller line. So basically, the bigger the line, the more cooks in the kitchen, the more people that are reviewing the character rollout. So now, the brand manager is responsible for a lot more than just selecting the figures. And of course, they're selecting the figures based on who's going to sell the best, which characters are going to make the company the most money. Now, as an adult collector, if you're, if you will, lucky, you're going to get a brand manager who is also a collector themselves. Although more likely, you're probably going to get someone who's, again, fresh out of school, very knowledgeable about how product production and placement works, but may not be a super expert on the brand. And that's okay because they're actually responsible for a lot of other things, advertising and trade shows and other, ways to have the brand interact with the public. But there's a difference between advertising and public relations. A brand manager is in charge of advertising. They are not in charge of PR. Sometimes you're going to get a brand manager who is kooky and crazy and willing to do the PR in his spare time. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. But getting someone who's, if you will, the hair club for men, who's also a member, if you will, like a collector who's also running a collector line, that doesn't happen as often as, it might be nice if it did. It's kind of the whole concept of staying in your lane. A lot of the big companies, the giant companies, are really big in everyone doing their specific job. As an example, Mattel actually does a kind of like an Oscars, like an internal award program, and I actually received one. This is the one I got for creating Maddie Collector. It's funny, they actually call it the Maddie Awards, but that has nothing to do with Maddie Collector. Mattel also does kind of their version of the Dundie Awards, like joke awards, if you will. the Maddie Awards are like the official nice ones. The Dundee, they're not called the Dundies. They're just, funny things we do as like morale. And I actually got the Stay in Your Lane award one year because I was doing my own PR, and it's like brand managers are not supposed to do PR. They're supposed to stick to brand management. And so that was kind of a joke. But 90% of the time, you're going to get a brand manager that is doing, a brand manager job, which means understanding the brand, researching it, figuring out how to get it to market, and yes, they're the ones choosing the characters. And of course, if the characters are owned by a third party, like a movie studio, then that movie studio is going to range everything from telling you exactly who to release to letting you have first crack at it, and then, approving it or giving you their comments. There's no one rule for how they do it. Every property is different. And likewise, how much middle management is involved in the approvals of character selection is based on how high profile the line is. The more high profile, the more middle management is going to have their say in character selection. The lower profile, the more the brand managers kind of get to do what he or she kind of wants or knows best. I hope this answered your questions. If you have further questions about character selection or what brand managers do, leave them in the comments below, and see you guys around the internet.